Warning, we're going to be talking about a serial killer. We are going to be talking about his crimes and his confessions. So listener discretion is advised. This is the Alex and Dom Show. I'm Alex.
And I'm Trey.
And today's going to be part 3 of the Milwaukee Monster, Jeffrey Dahmer.
Part 3.
Part 3. Last episode, we talked about all of his victims and how heinous his crimes were. We ended it with the escape of Tracy Edwards and Jeffrey Dahmer's eventual capture. In this episode, we're going to be going through his confession and also his trial and aftermath thereof.
And his friends.
Yeah, and his friends. Now, I had planned on playing parts of the trial through the episode, but I didn't get a legitimate answer of copyright issues. So you guys can watch the full trial on Court TV on YouTube. You watch on YouTube. Go to courttv.com. But I will not be playing snippets of that. I've heard other podcasts do it, but just to cover our legal asses, we will not be playing any of those.
Yeah, we're just being careful.
Yeah, just careful, overcautious. So, at the beginning, in the early hours of July 23rd, 1991, Dahmer was being questioned by Detective Patrick Kennedy as to the murders he had committed and the evidence found at his apartment. Kennedy and later Detective Dennis Murphy conducted numerous interviews with Dahmer that were a combined total of 60 hours, which is a great documentary on Netflix called The Confession Tapes of Jeffrey Dahmer. They play almost all of his confession tapes. It's amazing.
I have seen it.
Yep. So he waived his right to have a lawyer present. Why? Probably because he knew that Jake was up. Like, all of the evidence they found in his thing, and he's going to be like, I don't know how I got here. I'm not going to say anything.
So he's not planning on representing himself?
No.
Which
Ted Bundy and Rodney Alcala.
I didn't know that Rodney Alcala.
Oh my God. He did. Sorry to go on a little tangent there. He represented himself, and he even asked himself questions in the trial. Like, he asked himself, Rodney Alcala, in 2 different voices. One lawyer, one witness.
That's kind of funny.
Yeah. And it was humorous. He lost badly.
Obviously.
Actually 90% of people who represent themselves lose. It's a big margin. So he wished to confess to all that he, quote, created this horror, and it only makes sense that I do everything to put an end to it. So he admitted to killing 16 young men in Wisconsin and one further victim, Stephen Hicks, in Ohio. So all 17, he committed to all 17. Most of Dahmer's victims had been rendered unconscious prior to their murder, although some had died as a result of having acid and boiling water injected into their brain. He has had no memory of killing his second victim, Stephen Tulemy, which we said in the second episode. Actually, first and second.
I was going to say.
He was unsure whether he was unconscious when beaten to death, although he did concede it was possible that viewing his exposed chest of Tulemy while in a drunken stupor may have led him to unsuccessfully attempt to tear Tulemy's heart from his chest.
Which is still just as
bad. Which is why his chest was caved in and crushed. Almost all of the other murders were committed after moving to the Oxford apartments, where the infamous apartment raid happened. He had involved the ritual of posing victims' bodies in suggestive positions, typically with their chest thrust outwards prior to dismemberment. He also readily admitted to engaging in necrophilia with several of the victims' bodies, including performing sexual acts with their viscera as he dismembered their bodies in his bathtub. While much of the blood pooled inside his victim's chest after death, Dahmer first removed their internal organs, then suspended their torso so the blood drained into the bathtub, before dicing any organs he did not wish to retain and paring the flesh from the body. The bones he had wished to dispose of were pulverized or acidified with Solax and bleach solutions used to aid in the preservation of their skeletons. Skulls were one of the ones he wished to keep the most of. Dahmer confessed to having consumed the hearts, liver, biceps, and portions of the thigh of 3 of the victims he had killed at the Oxford Apartments: Raymond Smith, Ernest Miller, and Oliver Lacey, and to have retained the flesh and organs of other victims for intended consumption. Typically, Dahmer would tenderize the body parts he intended to consume prior to preparing meals flavored with various condiments. I wonder if he was a mustard guy or a ketchup guy.
Mustard.
Mustard? Yeah, sick bastard. He initially started consuming portions of the victims due to curiosity before adding, I suppose, I quote, "I suppose in an odd way it made me feel they were even more permanent part of me," which is another thing we discussed last episode, that just consuming their essence so they would never leave him. Describing the increase in his rate of killing in the last 2 months prior to his arrest, Dahmer stated that he had been completely swept along with his compulsion to kill, adding it was an insistent and never-ending desire to be with someone at whatever the cost. Someone good-looking, really nice-looking, it filled my thoughts all day long. When asked why he preserved a total of 7 skulls and the entire skeletons of 2 victims, Dahmer stated he had been in the process of reconstructing a private altar of victims. Skulls which he intended to display on the black table located in the living room, upon which he had photographed the bodies of many of his victims. I'm sorry, but if I enter a person's apartment and they have an altar of human skeletons, I don't know if I'm going to be staying in that apartment much longer.
Yeah, but people are weird.
They are. I think
And
it would be
into-
more acceptable nowadays
Yeah.
than it would be in the 90s. In the
That's
90s,
true.
it would be like more edgelord. Today, it would just be like, oh, you're just quirky.
You're into the occult.
Yeah,
That's cool.
You're quirky.
Where are your spell books?
Yeah, for real. Where are your stones?
Where's your crystals?
Yeah.
Your tarot cards.
So the tables also had incense sticks that were placed at each end of the black table. The complete skeletons were displayed on either side. 4 severed heads were found in the kitchen that were getting ready to have all of their flesh removed and used for the altar. So he was going to build this beautiful black thing, and he even illustrated it. And
How sweet.
yeah. It looks pretty morbid. When asked in November 18th, 1991, an interview to whom the altar was dedicated to, Dahmer replied, "Myself. It was a place where I could feel at home." He further described his intended altar as a place of meditation, from where he believed he could draw a sense of power, adding, if his arrest had happened 6 months later, it's what they would have found. The indictment. On July 25th, 1991, Dahmer was charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder. By August 22nd, he had been charged with a further 11 murders committed in Wisconsin. On September 14th, investigators in Ohio, having uncovered hundreds of bone fragments in woodland behind the address which Dahmer had confessed to killing his first victim, formally identified 2 molars and a vertebra, with X-ray records of Hicks. 3 days later, Dahmer was charged by authorities in Ohio with Hicks's murder. Dahmer was not charged with the attempted murder of Edwards, nor with the murder of Tuolumne. He was not charged with Tuolumne's murder because the district attorney only brought charges where murder could be proven beyond a reasonable doubt, and Dahmer had no memory of actually committing these particular murder, for which no physical evidence of the crime existed. At a scheduled preliminary hearing on January 13, 1992, Dahmer pleaded guilty but insane to all 15 counts of murder. So he didn't dispute that he killed them. He pleaded guilty. So he's going to jail no matter what. But the difference between pleading guilty and just taking the heat or pleading guilty but insane is whether he spends the rest of his life in prison or hospital.
Well, I think
I think a lot of people get that confused. Okay. You plead insane, and if you're found insane, you go to a hospital. But what people don't know, and what movies kind of and TV shows kind of like don't make clear, is when you go to jail for murdering someone, but you plead insanity, and you go to a hospital, you go to the hospital, but if they deem you cured, you don't get set free. You go to jail to finish your sentence.
for real.
Yes, you're doing time. The only difference is that you're getting medical help. Yeah, it's not a get out of free jail card.
Oh, so they don't. Wait, do they know that when they plead for like the insanity plea?
Most people, well, it offers a better living situation. Like, if you're in a mental institution, you're less likely to be raped by other prisoners, beaten to death. You're more looked after by the staff. Maybe not back in the 90s, but definitely now.
Well, I don't know. But, yeah, no, I did not know that. I mean, I never really thought, like, if you're really that insane, then I didn't think that you would ever get out.
No.
So.
Most people who plead insanity and get it or never leave the hospital. But if they were, and they were like, say someone was faking it to get out of prison time, and then like a psychiatrist was like, okay, you're faking it, we obviously know, and then you're going back to prison, you would just go to prison for the rest of your term. So Dahmer's trial began on January 30th, 1992. He was tried in Milwaukee for the 15 counts of first-degree murder before Judge Lawrence Graham. By pleading guilty on January 13th to the charges brought against him, Dahmer had waived his right to trial to establish guilt, as defined by Wisconsin law. Attorneys at Dahmer's trial debated whether he suffered from either a mental or paranoid personality disorder. Oh my God. I was going to say paranoid schizophrenic, but that's not what he has. The prosecution claimed that any disorders did not deprive Dahmer of his ability to appreciate the criminality of his conduct or deprive him of the ability to resist his impulses. Pretty much, he knew right from wrong. The defense argued that Dahmer suffered from a mental disease and was driven by obsessions and impulses he was unable to control. Now, in my opinion,
Excuse me.
I don't know about yours, but he controlled those impulses pretty well between his first murder and the second murder. It went 9 years between the two.
That's what I said. Insanity is hard to pull off in Dahmer's case because he made the conscious decision to not hold back anymore.
So if you commit a murder and you plead temporary insanity or insanity, it is not up to the defense to prove you are insane. It is up to the prosecution to prove that you are not. So the burden of the proof is on the state to prove not only are you guilty of the crimes, but you knew right from wrong when doing so. Defense experts argued that Dahmer was insane due to his necrophilic drive, his compulsion to have sexual encounters with corpses. Defense expert Fred Berlin testified that Dahmer was unable to conform his conduct at the time, and he committed these crimes due to a paraphilia, and more specifically, necrophilia. Judith Becker, a professor of psychiatry and psychology, was the second expert witness for the defense. Becker diagnosed Dahmer as a necrophiliac, although she added Dahmer had informed her he preferred comatose sexual partners to deceased ones. 75% of the time. So, like I said, it was just easier. All he wanted was control. Like I don't think he was a necrophiliac. Like he just liked to have sex with dead bodies. I think it was more like he liked having sex with things he had absolute control over. So, he probably preferred a warm body over a cold one. The final defense expert to testify was forensic psychiatrist Carl Warstrom. diagnosed Dahmer with necrophilia, borderline personality disorder, schizotypal personality disorder, alcohol dependence, and psychotic disorder. That is a lot of mental issues. Definitely had alcohol dependence.
Yes.
That's one that can be absolutely proven.
Yeah, but like he used that to try to
combat his impulses. On February,
which again shows that he's not insane.
Yeah. On February 8th, Fred Fostow testified on the behalf of the prosecution. Fostow testified that his belief that Dahmer was without mental disease or defect at the time he committed the murders. He described Dahmer as a calculating and cunning individual, able to differentiate between right and wrong, with an ability to control his actions, and whose lust overpowered his morals. Although Fostow did state his belief that Dahmer was a paraphilic, his conclusion was Dahmer was not a sadist. Remember what I said last episode? He killed for product, not for pleasure.
I think that our definition of sadist really...
He didn't like inflicting hurt on someone. All he wanted to do was create sex zombies. So he didn't want to hurt them. He just wanted to...
There's no excuse.
I know.
He also drilled in someone's head twice. Well, so...
It was more than twice. He did it for a lot of his victims. And then when the acid didn't work, he went to boiling water. The second and final witness to appear for the prosecution, forensic psychiatrist Park Dietz, began his testimony on February 12th. Dietz testified that he did not believe Dahmer had any form of mental disease or defect at the time that he committed these crimes. He stated that Dahmer went to great lengths to be alone with his victim and have no witnesses. He explained that there was ample evidence that Dahmer prepared in advance for each murder, and therefore his crimes were not impulsive. Although Dietz did not concede any acquisition of a paraphilia was not a matter of personal choice. So,
oh well, I don't think anybody would choose that.
Be surprised. A lot of morticians and medical examiners out there are probably like, I mean, there's a lot of evidence and a lot of cases to where most of them, they go into that profession for that.
That doesn't mean that it's a choice.
Yeah. He stated his belief that Dahmer's habit of becoming intoxicated prior to committing each of these murders was significant. If he had an impulse to kill or compulsion to kill, Dietz testified, he wouldn't have to drink alcohol to overcome it. He only has to drink alcohol to overcome it because he is inhibited against killing.
Just exposing himself.
Yeah. Dietz noted that Dahmer strongly identified with the villains of Exorcist III and The Return of the Jedi, particularly the level of power held by these characters.
I don't see why that's necessary to bring up.
I don't know. Expounding on the significance of these movies, Dahmer's psyche, and many of his murders committed at Oxford apartments, Dietz explained that Dahmer occasionally viewed scenes from these films before searching for a victim. Dietz diagnosed Dahmer with substance use disorder, paraphilia, and schizotypal personality disorder, but he didn't have any mental illnesses. So he contradicted himself. He diagnosed him with mental illnesses, but said he didn't have any mental illnesses. Like, what, he just developed them before getting caught?
I don't know. It's also, hard to sympathize.
Mm-hmm.
So, sounds like... Sorry. He needs to be a little bit more professional. Pretend like it's not a serial killer, I guess.
Dahmer did purchase contact lens to make his eyes look like Emperor Palpatine's in Return of the Jedi. But that being said, that doesn't make... Those movies do not make him a killer, which is why I don't understand why they're brought up. But it was at the time of the Satanic Panic, which I'm surprised they didn't throw a Satan in there.
On top of him being gay?
Yeah. So the closing arguments came about 2 weeks later, on February 14th. Both attorneys delivered their closing arguments to the jury. Each attorney was allowed to speak for 2 hours.
That's a long time.
Yeah, it is. Defense attorney Jared Boyle argued first, repeatedly referring to the testimony of the material mental health professionals, almost all of whom had agreed Dahmer was afflicted with mental disease on both sides. Boyle argued that Dahmer's compulsive killings had been a result of a sickness he discovered, not chose. Boyle portrayed Dahmer as a desperately lonely and profoundly sick individual, so out of control he could not conform his conduct anymore.
Well, that's true.
Yeah. Following the defense counsel's 75-minute closing argument, Michael McCain delivered his closing argument for the prosecution, describing Dahmer as a sane man.
Hold on a second. Okay. The defense's job is to make this guy look innocent, right? Mm-hmm. So his job is to doubt all the evidence.
Well,
I'm talking about in every case.
In every case, it's the defense's job to pretty much throw doubt on the state's case. Not to prove that they're innocent, just to give enough doubt for the jury to do a non-guilty. Because to be guilty, it has to be beyond reasonable doubt.
Right. And then, but
there is no reasonable doubt. This dude is guilty.
Yes. But the way that they talk, they address the courtroom, mm-hmm. right? The defense is careful and uses words that aren't shocking.
Yeah.
Instead
mm-hmm.
of being he is a necrophiliac, mm-hmm. right? He'd be like the comatose partners thing, mm-hmm. right? But the prosecution, while they don't have to worry about the defendant, mm-hmm. so their language is more to shock.
Yeah, like sexual deviant, and necrophiliac, and
they're
monster and sicko.
Yep, they are trying to put that into your mind that mm-hmm. again. So it's taking away the doubt. It's this guy is awful.
In every court TV show and movie you see, that is not exactly how it is. They can only make arguments towards the evidence presented in the trial.
Yeah,
so they can't tell you a story.
Like in A Time to Kill.
No, because that was relevant to the crime.
That's true. That's true. It was.
Yeah,
but it was still a story.
But Boston Legal, when they were telling you a story about a rabbit out of a hat or something. Or they buried a rabbit and stuff. No, they can't tell you that. It has nothing to do with the crime or the case. So they can't tell you random ass stories to make you feel sorry. No.
Unless they use facts from the case.
But he described Dahmer as a sane man in full control of his actions, who simply strove to avoid detection. McCann described Dahmer as a calculated individual who killed to control his victims and retained their bodies merely to afford himself a prolonged period of sexual pleasure. McCann argued that by pleading guilty but insane to the charges, Dahmer was seeking to escape responsibility for his crimes, which he wouldn't have. Not really.
They felt like he was. They were like, this dude's definitely trying to get out of jail
and all of this whole trial was televised.
Okay.
So it was.
Is this weird for the time?
Besides OJ, this was one of the biggest trials.
So this being televised inside the courtroom is not normal?
No.
For the time?
Not really.
I'll say because nowadays a lot of court cases are televised.
Some of them aren't. It depends on the state in which it happens. Also, it depends on the judge. If the judge doesn't allow cameras in the courtroom, too bad, so sad.
Then you get the dude who draws people.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. A court pictography?
I don't know.
Photographer, I guess. I think they're called photographers, but they just draw pictures.
They draw them.
I can't remember what they're called. Characters? I don't know. Anyways. On February 15th, the court reconvened to hear the verdict. Dahmer was ruled to be insane and not suffering from a mental disorder at the time of each of the 15 murders, for which he was tried. although in each count, 2 of the 12 jurors signified their dissent. Former sentencing was postponed until February 17th. On this date, Dahmer's attorney announced his client wished to address the court. Dahmer then approached a lectern and read from a statement prepared by himself in his defense as he faced the judge. In this statement, Dahmer emphasized that he had never desired freedom following his arrest, and that he frankly wished for his own death. He further stressed that none of his murders had been motivated by hatred, that he understood that nothing he either said or did could undo the terrible harm he had caused to the families of his victims and the city of Milwaukee, and that he and his doctors believed his criminal behavior had been motivated by mental disorders. Dahmer added that the medical knowledge he had given him some peace, that although he understood the society would never forgive him, he hoped God would. Dahmer closed the statement with, "I know my time in prison will be terrible, but I deserve whatever I get because of what I have done. Thank you, Your Honor, and I am prepared for your sentence, which I know will be the maximum. I ask for no consideration." He then returned to his seat to await formal sentencing.
Okay, he's not cocky or overconfident. He's like almost remorseful.
I wouldn't say remorseful. I think he knows what he did was wrong. Mm-hmm. And I think he knows what happens when you do something wrong. You get punished for it. So I'm thinking he's resigned to his fate. I wouldn't say remorseful. I think he's admitting that he's going to jail forever.
Yeah,
and that there's really nothing he can do about it.
It's just
really
weird.
Didn't apologize to the victims.
No, he didn't. But he
said,
did acknowledge.
He acknowledged the harm he did to them
and the families and the city itself, which is it's just weird. There's no he's smart. He's not saying the stuff he's saying to try to get himself less time. He's saying it because he feels like it needed to be said. I don't know. It's just a contradiction. Mm-hmm. To a lot of serial killer types. Like I said, it's not like exactly remorseful, but it's like he knows that he's supposed to do it. Mm-hmm. So it's like a show, but also not a show at the same time. Yeah. Because a show is to get something in return.
There was no reason for it. He just did it.
He just did it.
Which you can do to, I guess, lessen the sentencing.
But he's not trying to do that.
He's asking for the maximum.
Yeah, he is. And
he wanted the death penalty.
And
but
he also sounds like he wants to go to prison. But I also like that he put in that, finding out that it's a mental thing, it's not just something wrong with him. He has a name now to why he is the way he is. It give him some peace. Peace
in mind. And pretty much like... Dahmer is just a weird serial killer in himself. Mm-hmm. He's unique, almost. Not apologetic, not remorseful, but he knows what he did was wrong, and he knows he's facing. In my biggest opinion, he is the manliest serial killer because he's stepping up and taking the punishment. Like, hey, I did this. I did it.
I'm not trying to shirk.
I'm not trying to sugarcoat it. I'm not trying to be like, oh, this is why I did it. Like, I didn't know that this mental illness existed. Mm-hmm. I'm glad I know now, but yeah.
Give me the worst you got. I'll take it. I deserve it.
So.
He's weird. Definitely a contradiction.
Dahmer was then sentenced to life imprisonment plus 10 years upon the first 2 counts. The remaining 13 counts carried a mandatory sentence of life imprisonment plus 70 years. The death penalty was not an option for Judge Graham to consider a penalty phase, as Wisconsin had abolished capital punishment in 1853.
Such a long time away. That is ridiculous.
Yeah, it is. And just for the simple fact that I go back and forth with the death penalty. I don't really agree with it because it's like 2 wrongs don't make it right. Like, why do we get to kill them, but they don't get to kill people kind of thing? I don't know, that sounds horrible, but it's. But there's also some cases that you're just like, oh my God, just kill them. But to me, they don't suffer enough. Like, they suffer more in life imprisonment. Upon hearing Dahmer's sentencing, his father Lionel and stepmother Shuri requested to be allowed a 10-minute private meeting with their son before he was transferred to the Columbia Correctional Institution in Portage
I'll say
to begin his sentence.
He's not a danger to anyone but his victims.
Nope. The request was granted, and the trio exchanged hugs and well wishes before Dahmer was escorted away. Notice his mother wasn't there.
Not surprised.
Yeah. 3 months after his conviction in Milwaukee, Dahmer was extradited to Ohio to be tried for his first murder victim, Stephen Hicks. In a court hearing lasting just 45 minutes, Dahmer again pleaded guilty to the charges and was sentenced to 16th term of life imprisonment on May 1st, 1992. I'm sorry. I know there's justice to be done, but what is the point of just stacking life sentences on someone? Like, just give them life. Like, there's no way he's going to get out of prison with life imprisonment.
Well, you know why they do that is because, people used to live until they're like 45. So life in prison back then, and compared to now, and when you could live to your 90, they want to make sure there's no way for you to get out.
No. Well, life imprisonment without any possible parole is just like you die in prison.
Yeah, but like I said, life was different when they first started the life in prison nonsense.
So my thing is...
So they have to make sure...
Let's say he dies 16 times, but's brought back. Dies for 2 minutes. Like, that's my thing. Okay, so if you're given life in prison, right, and then you die, and then they bring you back 2 minutes later, they resuscitate you. Technically, you died. An argument could be made.
And you wouldn't win.
I know, but an argument could be made, and I'm wondering why it hasn't. So after sentencing, Dahmer was transferred to the Columbia Correctional Institution. For the first year of his incarceration, Dahmer was placed in solitary confinement due to the concerns for his physical safety should he come in contact with fellow inmates. He received ample correspondence from individuals across the world, with several individuals donating money which he had spent on items such as cassette recordings, stationery, cigarettes, and magazines. Upon Dahmer's request, after 1 year in solitary confinement, he was transferred to a less secure unit, where he was assigned a 2-hour daily work detail cleaning the toilet block. This work detail later expanded to include cleaning the prison gymnasium. Shortly after completing his lengthy confessions in 1991, Dahmer had requested Detective Murphy that he had be given a copy of the Bible. This request was granted, and Dahmer gradually devoted himself to Christianity and became a born-again Christian. On his father's urging, he also read creationist books from an Institute of Creation Research. In May 1994, Dahmer was baptized by Roy Ratcliffe, a minister of the Church of Christ and a graduate of Oklahoma Christian University, whom he had met on April 20th. His service was conducted in the prison whirlpool. Following Dahmer's baptism, Ratcliffe visited him every week. The two regularly discussed the prospect of death, and Ratcliffe later divulged that, in the months prior to his murder, Dahmer had questioned whether he was sinning against God by continuing to live. Referring to his crimes as in a 1994 interview with Stone Phillips on Dateline NBC, which is one of the best interviews of a serial killer of all time. Go watch it. It's amazing. Dahmer had stated, if a person doesn't think that there is a God to be accountable to, then what's the point of trying to modify your behavior to keep it within acceptable ranges?
Just be a good person.
I thought anyway. I know. I don't understand that.
Well, if there is no God, then why are you being a good person? Because I believe in being a good person. I don't need God or... I don't know. I just don't get that argument.
On July 3rd, 1994, a fellow inmate, Osvaldo Dorici, attempted to slash Dahmer's throat with a razor embedded into a toothbrush as Dahmer sat in the prison chapel after the weekly church service was concluded.
How rude.
Dahmer received superficial wounds and was not seriously hurt in this incident. According to Dahmer's family, he had long been ready to die and accepted any punishment which he might endure in prison. In addition to his father and stepmother maintaining regular contact, Dahmer's mother, Joyce, also maintained regular contact with her son. Surprising. Prior to his arrest, the two had not seen each other since Christmas 1983.
Jeez. But she's talking to him every day. Or, I mean, not every day. Well,
Joyce related that in her weekly phone calls, whenever she expressed concern for her son's physical well-being, Dahmer responded with comments to the effect of, "It doesn't matter, Mom. I don't care if something happens to me."
I would also call my son weekly, even if he was a serial killer. But I also wouldn't have not seen him since
1983.
Yeah.
So it's been 10 years.
Yeah, poor thing.
And it took getting arrested for multiple murders to have his
Yeah,
mother
for her to
talk
even
him.
try to talk to him.
On the morning of November 28th, 1994, Dahmer left his cell to conduct his assigned work detail. Accompanying him were two fellow inmates, Jesse Anderson and Christopher Scarbo. The trio were left unsupervised in the showers of the prison gym for approximately 20 minutes. At approximately 8:10 a.m., Dahmer was discovered on the floor of the bathrooms of the gym, suffering from extreme head wounds. He had been severely bludgeoned about the head and face with a 20-inch metal bar. His head had also been repeatedly struck against the wall during the assault. Dahmer was still alive and was rushed to a nearby hospital. He was then pronounced dead an hour later. Anderson had been beaten with the same instrument and died from his wounds 2 days later. Scarver, who was serving a life sentence for a murder he committed in 1990, informed authorities that he had at first attacked Dahmer with a metal bar as Dahmer was cleaning a staff locker room, before attacking Anderson as Anderson cleaned an inmate locker room. According to Scarva, Dahmer did not yell or make any noise as he was attacked. Immediately after attacking both men, Scarver, who was thought to be schizophrenic, returned to his cell and informed a prison guard, "God told me to do it." Jesse Anderson and Jeffrey Dahmer are dead. Scarva was adamant that he had not planned the attack in advance, although he later divulged to the investigators he had concealed the 20-inch iron bar used to kill both men in his clothing shortly before the killings. So obviously, he had planned to kill them.
He had planned it.
Upon learning of his death, Dahmer's mother, Joyce, responded angrily to the media. "Now is everyone happy now that he's bludgeoned to death, and is that good enough for you?" The response of the families of Dahmer's victims were mixed. Some celebrated the news, while others were saddened. Catherine Lacey, the mother of victim Oliver Lacey, remarked, "The hurt is worse now because he's not suffering like we are." The district attorney who prosecuted Dahmer cautioned against turning Scarver into a folk hero, saying that Dahmer's death was still murder. On the 15th of May, 1995, Scarver was sentenced to 2 additional terms of life imprisonment for the murders of Dahmer and Anderson. Dahmer stated in his will that he wished for no services to be conducted and that he wished to be cremated. So in September 1995, Dahmer's body was cremated and his ashes divided between his parents. Owing to a disagreement between his parents as to whether Dahmer's brain should be retained for medical research, this organ was initially retained but later cremated in December 1995, which is, I wish they would have studied it.
I bet it was his mom who was against it.
Probably.
His dad doesn't seem like the type that would be against, scientific anything.
Yeah, absolutely. So the building, the Oxford apartments that he killed 12 of his victims in it, was demolished in November 1992, and the site is now a vacant lot. Alternate plans to convert the site into a memorial garden or playground or to reconstruct new housing have failed to materialize. Dahmer's estate was awarded to the families of 11 of his victims who had sued for damages. In 1996, Thomas Jacobson, a lawyer representing 8 of the families, announced a planned auction of Dahmer's estate. Although victims' relatives stated the motivation was not greed, the announcement sparked controversy. A civic group, Milwaukee Civic Pride, was quickly established in an effort to raise the funds to purchase and destroy many of Dahmer's possessions. The group pledged $407,225, including a $100,000 gift by Milwaukee real estate developer Joseph Zilber for purchase of Dahmer's estate. 5 of the 8 families represented by Jacobson agreed to the terms, and Dahmer's possessions were subsequently destroyed and buried in undisclosed Illinois landfill. So if anybody was trying to collect shit, can't do it.
It'd be weird to do so, but there are a lot of weirdos.
Yeah, absolutely. In 1994, Lionel published a book, A Father's Story, and donated a portion to the proceeds from his book to the victims' families. Most of the families showed support for Lionel and Shuri, although 3 families subsequently sued Lionel, 2 for using their names in the book without obtaining prior consent, and the 3rd family, that of Stephen Hicks, filing a wrongful death suit against Lionel and Shuri and former wife Joyce, citing parental negligence as a cause for the claim. That's kind of messed up.
Well, I mean,
at that time, it was kind of negligent. But he was 18 at the time he killed, so.
It doesn't matter. They made him what he is.
Yep. Lionel Dahmer lived with his second wife, Shuri, until her death in January 2023. He died of natural causes on December 5th of 2023. Both refused to change their surname and professed their love for Dahmer in spite of his crimes. Joyce Flint died of cancer on November 27, 2000. Prior to her death, she attempted suicide on at least one occasion. Dahmer's younger brother, David, changed his surname and lives in anonymity. So that's what happened to his father and mother. I really did think that his dad was still alive, but I guess at the time I had planned on doing this episode, he was alive. So, let's talk about his friends. There's a particular woman. I don't want to divulge her name because
people are weird.
But she heard about Jeffrey Dahmer's crimes. Obviously, she lived in the building at the time, and she was surprised as anybody because he didn't really put off a killer vibe.
Just the stink.
Yeah, just a stink. And she was friends with him. Said hi to him, and actually that. And upon learning about his death from the prison, she cried, and people were asking her, why you're crying, like, how could you be friends with a murderer like this and stuff? And she said that she didn't know him as a murderer. She knew him as Jeffrey, a good friend. So, I mean, people can be friends with a murderer and still not Dom, but
yeah, not Dom.
Yeah, but it's crazy. Now let's get into the rumor surrounding his death.
I was gonna bring that up.
Yeah. All right. So I told you the actual way he died and who did it. But there's another claim on his death that was unique and I think clouded a lot of people's view on his death. Same with the barbell beating him to death. But there was also a rumor that someone shoved a mop handle up his rectum and out through his mouth. I've heard that. Or broke a mop handle off into his rectum. That did not happen.
Obviously.
And I think that it's because he was gay. And that also, I guess, to make it worse than what it was, people were like, oh, he got what he deserved. And when that rumor came out, they were like, oh, well, then he definitely got what he deserved. I think he got what he deserved with the life imprisonment that he got. The justice system did an actually good job at this location, like this instance, giving him the 16 life sentences. I don't agree with his crimes at all, but I don't think he deserved to be beaten to death. But I think he was just reserved. If anything, he probably didn't even fight back.
I was gonna say the dude pretty much said he didn't make a sound.
Yeah, he didn't make a sound. He didn't fight back. He just
died.
It.
Yeah.
So, no, he did not have anything placed in his rectum, and he did not get cannibalized himself, which was another rumor. He did joke with the other prisoners, saying that on many occasions that he would like to eat some of them. So pulling one of his own Dahmers, pulling a Dahmer.
Say, he was the class clown.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, no, that's the story of Jeffrey Dahmer.
Well, I definitely was surprised when I found out the way he died, because I was told multiple times by multiple people that it was the broomstick one.
Yeah.
Or the mop one.
Mop handle and stuff, and it just wasn't.
Yeah, and now... sorry. It makes sense. You know, now that I'm older, that it would be that way because he's gay.
Yep.
And that just makes it 30,000 times more messed up because, you know.
Like I said, I don't know if we could have learned any more from Jeffrey Dahmer, from educational purposes and stuff, of like psychiatry and everything like that, because he was pretty forthcoming within the years that he was caught, within the 3 or 4 years he was caught, and did interviews. Like I said, he did one of the best interviews from a serial killer, like, ever.
That's because he felt more honest than the other ones.
Yeah, he felt like... I mean, granted, I wouldn't let him go. Like, he was going to kill him again. Like,
yeah,
if he had the opportunity, he was going to kill again. He knew that, and he knew he deserved jail. And I think that's what makes him different, because Bundy was, oh, I'm innocent.
That's what I
from
was
the
saying.
get-go. Gacy was, I didn't kill these guys. Like, pretty much every serial killer caught who confesses still holds on to, oh, this made me do it. Bundy was, pornography made him do it, which, that was at the end. He was trying to get a stay of execution. But like I said, Dahmer was just like, I want the death penalty, please kill me. I want to die. You know, like, I did wrong and stuff.
He just picked the wrong state to murder a whole bunch of people in.
Well, he got the death penalty. He wanted it, he got it.
Yeah, as a born-again Christian, baptized born-again Christian, yeah, he went to heaven.
If you believe in that.
It's not a, like, I'm not saying
according
it from
to the
a
religion,
belief point.
Yeah, from a belief thing, he did go, which is...
he would have went to heaven.
Yeah. Anyways, regardless of whether he did or not, our hearts, from the Alex and Dom side, our hearts go out to the victims and the victims' families. That and just... I mean,
and any victims he might not have actually... admitted to.
Yeah, there might have been other victims, we don't know. I know that they looked into several crimes that happened in Germany when he was stationed over there as well. The only thing that fit his MO was a girl. And he didn't kill girls. He
didn't do girls.
He was one of the very few serial killers who actually crossed racial divides. Usually sexually motivated killers do not kill outside of their race.
But he's not sexually motivated.
He's not, but he did kill white people. I think the first 2 victims were white, and most of them were either South Pacific Asian or of African American descent. So, also, them being gay and people of color, they were not looked for, as well as white people would have been looked for. I mean, it's horrible to say, but it's how it was back then. Of course,
that's how it is still.
Yeah. It sucks.
I found out that they have a term, the police do. Mm-hmm. NHI.
NHI.
Means no humans involved. Yeah. It's a nice way of saying that the victim lived outside of polite society and was of no importance.
Wow. That's horrible.
Yeah.
I think
so.
There's another term like undesirables and
yeah, but that's the term that they use within the police force.
But it's crazy.
It's a reality, like homeless people, prostitutes. You know, the people back in the 80s and 90s, it'd be gay people.
Yeah.
Satanic people.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, that was Jeffrey Dahmer Part 3. A wild ride, this 3-part thing. A lot of info that I knew of and others I didn't. I, along with other people, believe the mop bucket or mop handle thing.
Yeah,
For the
again.
longest time, I grew up knowing that story. So I'm glad that we squashed that right here.
I'll say I don't think it's ever been. Well, I don't listen to other podcasts. I'm loyal to this one.
Yeah. I've heard it in other ones, but like I said, it wasn't until my adult years that I realized the whole story of it.
And the nature of the rumor.
Yeah, absolutely. And so next episode, we're going to be covering bizarre unsolved mysteries from around the world. I'm super excited about that. Will you be joining us, Trey, or is it just going to be me and Dom?
I'm not sure yet.
Okay. Well, you have a whole week to decide.
I do.
Thank you guys so much. If you could, just leave a review, comment, and subscribe.
Let us know if you're shocked by the way he really died.
Yeah. And let us know if we did a good job or something. I mean,
and
it
what
helps.
rumors
It really helps.
What rumors you were told when you were young.
Yeah, what rumors about anyone who was killed or anything like that.
That you were surprised to find. I'm not talking like Mandela effect shit.
Yeah, I'm talking about like a rumor that you like. If you take a shower in a lightning storm or a thunderstorm, you're going to get struck by lightning. I was told that all the time.
Yeah, I believe that all the way up into my adulthood.
Yeah, that's not true. Or if you're on the phone.
Yeah.
And I'm like on my cell phone, and my mom's on her cell phone, and she's like, I got to get off the lightning can come through the phone. I'm like, it's not attached to anything. What are you talking about? It doesn't like jump from like cell phone waves. But
yeah, it just
it's just like we're told. So we might do an episode about that. Just old wives' tales.
All weird shit you're told as a kid.
Old shit that you told as a kid. That's like not
that your
true
parents
at all.
100% believe.
Yeah, and still believe.
Yeah. There's a lot.
But there's a thing where it's like don't get in cars with strangers, stranger danger and stuff, and like we're here like meeting people off Tinder and like Ubering and stuff.
I was going to say Ubering's a big one.
Yeah, Ubering.
DoorDash.
There's a little bit more protection with Ubering, but like with Tinder, I'm surprised there's not a Tinder serial killer out there.
Probably is.
Because there's also like Lonely Hearts, the Lonely Hearts killer, which was like a thing.
Yeah, but that was like newspapers, was it?
Yeah, I mean, well, and then the internet came around, and then you had people killing off that.
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole
stuff.
TV series to, Dateline.
Yeah, there is a Tinder thing, I think, but I think he was just like conning people,
Oh.
like conning people out of money and stuff.
I would rather him be doing that than killing people.
But I don't know. I'll look into it because that would be. I will be 100% surprised if there is not a murderer linked to Tinder. Wow, Tyndall. Tinder. Or Grindr or any other dating site.
You have to go back to like the eHarmony and shit like that.
Oh my god. Or OkCupid.
Yeah.
Stuff like I don't know if eHarmony or OkCupid are even around. I think the one I see advertisements for all the time is Bumble.
A Bumble. Yeah, but
I
that's
see them all the time. Bumble. I don't even see Tinder anymore.
Bumble's for friends.
Is it really?
Mm-hmm. As to how you meet like-minded friends.
Okay. I don't know. I don't get on any of those things. But Facebook and Instagram and not even Twitter. I barely get on Twitter anymore, ever.
X,
whatever. I barely get on it. Instagram is where I spend most of my time, or Facebook, most likely Facebook.
That's because we're old.
Yeah. You know what? I still get on MySpace.
I would if I could remember my password.
Yeah.
Or my email.
Well, I don't think they've saved. I think they've deleted most of the profiles that were created back when we were growing up. But yeah, that was the end of this episode. We appreciate you guys listening, and as always, thank you for listening.
Yep.